I don't believe she was there for me. So
I'm
just-
sorry, for the change you did.
The change of this, it says Ward was seated by Thorne. I don't know where who
Yeah.
seated her. I
Oh.
wasn't attending. It just,
Seated by
Instead of
two
seated
vote,
for,
four.
seated for, okay. Yes, she was not here present.
Thank you.
maybe just 4 versus 5 would be sufficient, so. Okay.
I will change it, I'll make it change.
Thank you.
All right, anything else?
I've read through the others, Mr. Chairman, and I'd make a motion after that change that we accept the minutes of December 11th,
Thank you.
2023.
Okay, at that meeting, it appears as though, in addition to Ann, was Brian, myself, and Jay, so we'll need a second from.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and second to accept the minutes of December 11th, 2023 as presented. Any questions on the motion? All those in favor of the motion, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Get that out of the way. So we have a public hearing tonight, ZBA number 23-017, an appeal of the planning board's decision regarding the use determined in the site plan review application submitted by Fieldstone Land Consultants on behalf of All Purpose Storing West LLC, property located at 115 Base Hill Road. Subject property shown at tax map 203 lot 20 and is located in both the business district and rural ag district. Seated for this will be myself, Brian, Ann, and Lisa, and we'll seat Jay Ward as the fifth member. So considering that, we are here to consider the planning board application as being complete. And that the use being quote services unquote in the business district. We'll open up the public hearing and we'll hear from the person who's got it. Yes, thank you. Identify yourself for a minute taker.
Yes, my name is Joe Hoppick, and I'm an attorney in Keene. I
Thank you.
represent Ms. Howard right here, sitting to my left. Now, I'll just briefly refer to the minutes of the planning board. If I put my glasses on, as to what the issue is, as I understand it. From the minutes of September 14th of 2023, the planning board determined that the use in question, the proposed use in question with respect to this application from all purpose is a services use under the ordinance and therefore is permitted. We disagree. The relevant minutes suggest that the chair said if the board agrees that this application is for services, then the application is appropriate. But this business will be for multi-tenants, and therefore they will need to go to the planning board for each tenant. As chair said, the building is set in the plans that are approved will be enforced by code enforcement. The chair asked if all agree that this application is for business services. He also noted encroaching into another district can occur by 30 feet. We take no issue with that. All agreed that this application is about services. There was no debate, there was no discussion. One person, Victoria Ames, asked why this wasn't in the industrial park considered for this project. And Mr. Brennan said this was light industrial. We think it's commercial, and I'll explain why. Now, the proposal calls for two 36,000 square foot structures within which there will be 40 individual bays or units. Now, these units will be 30 by 60 feet in diameter in dimension. You have to ask yourself, what's going to go on inside a 30 by 60 foot unit? Well, they tell us more in their application because 5 employees are expected to be employed per unit. So who will the tenants be? The tenants will be contractors, people in the trades, people who are electricians, plumbers, heating, air conditioning, service providers. Now, these people will be there renting these 30 by 60 foot units. What will they do there? They will keep their employees there and they will keep materials there and store them. They will warehouse their materials that they will use for jobs. They will also dispatch people from that site, from Base Hill Road, to jobs within the area. So if you're a contractor, if you're an electrician or a plumber, let's say, and you have a lot of materials and supplies that you may need for a job that's 2 or 3 miles away, it's more convenient and efficient for you to store your materials at this place. And that's what this business model calls for. They will put those materials in those units, store them, keep 5 employees or so per unit so that they can take dispatch orders and supply labor to job sites in the area. So these people will be there on call, ready to go to a job. They'll be there ready to dispatch parts to a job. They will be there to service the contractor's work at another site. There'll be no customers coming to this site to buy parts or contractor services from these people. They are there simply to facilitate and support the tenant who's renting the space. Now, there is not going to be any sale of physical materials from these sites. They'll store materials needed for jobs. As I said, they'll fabricate materials. Mr. Brandon from Fieldstone mentioned that, and that's in the minutes. They're going to do light fabrication there. So if a plumber needs a specialized fitting or a pipe that needs to be molded, if you will, for a certain hard to reach space, they will mold that part there within that 30 by 60 foot structure or unit. They will do fabrication of parts there, send them from that unit to the job site so they can be used at the job site. That's not really services to the public of any kind. The applicant is not proposing to have customers come to this site for contracting purposes, for retail, if you will, services. Nobody's going to, as I mentioned, nobody's going to buy parts there or materials. Nobody's going to come in and say, hey, I have a job that I want you to quote. They're not going to have offices there. They're going to have 30 by 60 foot units used for storing materials, not servicing customers. And as I mentioned, the applicant will be shipping these goods, storing them, and then transporting them from storage to a job site when needed. And the same will be true with the workers, the 5 people who are there. These people are going to be full-time employees, no doubt. They're going to be, not going to be just paid to sit around at that unit. What are they going to do? They're going to be there doing the inventory and dispatching the materials and supplies in their own labor when needed. Now, there's been an issue about whether or not this board has jurisdiction over this appeal. I just want to speak briefly to that. You have in the minutes from the planning board, they made an interpretation of the zoning ordinance. They called it a services use. And I've tried to explain to you in my written materials and tonight why we think it's not a services use, why we think it's commercial use. That is clearly an appeal of an administrative decision that's probably before you. And the other thing I want to add, this is not a question of administrative gloss. This is an issue for your board to determine, to try to define what actually is the use here. Is it services? Is it something else? And I submit to you it's something else for the reasons I've explained. And that's properly before you, and that's not an issue of administrative gloss, because it doesn't even come close to services in our view. What we have here is activity at this site, at the Space Hill Road property site, that is occurring at 40 units, 30 by 60 in size, leased to commercial tenants involved in the construction trades. And the activity that's going to go on at this site will go to support the business activity of the tenants. That's it. And that's, we think, what the nutshell is here. And we ask you to define this as a commercial use requires a variance. And I thank you for your time and your patience. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the applicant care to rebut or give a second? Yes. Say your name for us.
Good evening, board members. My name is Chris Swiniarski. I'm an attorney from Divine Millimet, representing All-Purpose Storage Swanzey West LLC. So as we know, my client applied for planning board approvals for contractor bays, and I don't necessarily disagree with Attorney Hoppe's characterization of what these bays are for. I also don't think the board needs an explanation of what contractor bays are. These are bays where tradesmen who provide services to the community basically have their headquarters. They keep their vehicles, their equipment, etc. Now that application was in the business district where the use of services allowed. We're only here just talking about what does services mean in the zoning ordinance. In this town, the town has consistently interpreted this very use, contractor bays, to be services, and it's done so in various different zones. That very much implicates the legal maxim of administrative gloss. The town can't consistently apply one interpretation and then one day say, no, it's different now. The only way the town can do that is with a zoning amendment. And furthermore, the interpretation was a pretty reasonable one. I mean, these are actually services that are being provided. So really, the planning board in making that interpretation, or the planning department, we're not exactly sure where the determination actually happened, but that's a logical one. And it follows the precedent that the town has followed. It's a reasonable one as well. There's no legal basis to overturn that and grant the appeal sought, because it was reasonable, it was logical, and you have administrative gloss now where that has been consistently applied such that it has become the law. If you have any questions about the materials I provided, or if you haven't seen some of the examples of that consistent application, I did provide, I think, 6 of them in the papers that I submitted, but we could talk about any of those if necessary. Otherwise, that's all I have for you.
Questions from board members?
So you're the attorney for the applicant. They're not represented here to answer any questions about the facility?
The engineer is not here tonight. He couldn't be here, and I didn't think we had actual questions about the facility, but if you do have questions, I can try to answer them.
Oh, no.
They're pretty detailed in the plans.
So I've seen them in the plans and I've seen them in the original application. I've just, that was in the application, the applicant, when the person who filled it out. They're the ones that, when they filled out the section, question 6, proposed permitted use per zoning services, and parentheses, to be rented out to various service businesses, plumbing, HVAC, landscaping, electrical, etc. So that was the example the applicant used in their submission to the planning board.
Correct.
I just wanted to understand that. And for myself, because there's been a number of, we haven't met many times now, like 3, 4, I think. The original application said 5 employees with 40 units. I believe it's fewer now.
I don't know that anyone can be, are you talking about fewer
Units.
I don't know the final unit count now.
Okay, I'll just have to look again.
To be honest, I don't know how that
I'm just
unit
wondering if
count
the number-
impacts.
The number of anticipated employees was the same. It's about 200, right?
I don't know that you can actually estimate
Yeah,
the number of employees.
okay.
You may have one contractor, whatever business that contractor may be engaged in, whether it's HVAC or plumbing.
Yeah.
It's hard to say how many employees.
Might only need one.
It might be one.
Yeah.
It is hard to tell. I don't think the nature of the case here has to do with the number of employees.
Right, okay.
Really. What I would say though, when it comes down to numbers and impacts, the use that we anticipate at this property is a far less intense use than what the appellant proposes is the permitted use of sort of a retail type of situation where people are coming to the property for a service. Certainly that's going to be more intense than what we anticipate the use to be, which is your conventional type of contractor base that I think people are fairly familiar with.
All right. Thank
So people will not be coming to the site as customers?
I think occasionally people can, but generally, no. These are contractor bays where, again, contractors store their equipment, their inventory, and these are generally contractors that are providing services to other places by the nature of the trade.
So let's just expand a little bit about what goes on at the site. We have bays which are big enough to hold vehicles. There might be a vehicle inside as well as outside. There's additional space beside the bays. Is that like office, or is that, will there be internet there? Will there be people taking orders through online orders or whatever?
Frequently, all of those things happen in contractor bays. We don't have a tenant list or any of these leased out yet, so we don't have the actual tenants yet. And that's why I think the planning board mentioned, and it's a valid point, that there could conceivably be certain uses that, if proposed, would have to come back to the planning board.
Or perhaps the zoning.
Or perhaps the zoning board, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. It really depends, but the intended use, again, are these standard contractor bays, which are just as you described. There would be vehicles, if it was a plumber, for example, fittings, all kinds of equipment. And yes, you may assemble certain things. I can give you an example of, in an HVAC situation, if you're getting a new boiler installed, there is a little bit of assembly that takes place first, and that would frequently happen there rather than at a customer's house. Is that light manufacturing? I don't know that I would call it light manufacturing, but I mean, you get the gist of what is going on here. These are service trades, and they do some prep work at these contractor bays, as any service trade would.
A couple questions to each of you, but I'll ask individually if that's acceptable to you. So we're really here to define whether the planning board to sustain or not sustain the planning board's perceived use. Okay. So we're in agreement on that. And now we're really just going to define in our case here about services. Do you agree with that?
Yes, but I think you have to go along with what the town has consistently applied.
Oh, no, I understand that. I just want to make sure that the base is set.
Yeah, the base
So
it said here
define
is
services.
if what we applied for is services or not. Yes.
And would you agree with that as well, Council?
Broadly speaking, I would, yeah.
Okay.
And I can speak to that more when I get my turn. But yes, generally, yes.
Okay, and from what I'm hearing you say, there is a possibility that there may be what we determine as individuals in the community as traditional retail services, where I'm going to a window front and I'm exchanging money for parts or money for services. And what you're saying, what I think I heard you say, is there is a potential for that to happen here.
There's a potential for that to happen. Yeah. As I said, there aren't tenants yet. So, the design is what it is. That in creating that design, we anticipate certain types of tenants, but obviously any tenant that may want to rent this space, they can rent the space. If they have a use that requires further relief from this board, they can come to that board to seek that relief if needed. So there's really infinite, well, let's not say infinite potential. That might be a little bit excessive, but yeah, there's potential for all kinds of tenants to be there.
And so is it safe to say as well, from based on your testimony, there's not any office space as we would consider traditional office space in there? These are essentially what we would deem mini storage buildings.
No, actually, there typically will be office space in there and internet and things like that. I think, as I mentioned, when you, sir, had raised that, it is going to be as you described. So frequently, when you have these contractor bays, there will be small office area in there. And there will be, of course, internet and things like that in the office. It's not fair to characterize it as an office building or an office, the whole space is an office space, but yeah, these frequently have office space in them. Very frequently.
Any other questions, Brian?
Good for now.
Okay.
Can you elaborate on some of the other approved uses of things like this in the town?
Sure. The examples that I submitted to the record were, I have to be honest, I don't know a lot about them, but I talked to the planning department and the engineer about them. But the examples I had were, so March 25th, 2021, an application by Furlone LLC. May 13th, 2021, application by Tenney Electric. December 9th, 2021, application by Pappas Construction. June 22nd, 23, Glass Repair Shops and Tri-State Restoration Company. April.
So are you able to characterize what goes on at those businesses?
Well, yeah, these are similar businesses. So for example, Tenney Electric, an electric contractor, Pappas Construction, a construction contractor. The last one in there is a landscape contractor, Four Seasons. So that's consistent with the characterizations that we've been discussing.
Would you know where the nearest one of these happens to be to us tonight? Something like this, because I'm pretty well aware of the various communities we have here, and I don't know of anyone that is in a truly, it goes to the level of being a contractor bay. Do you know of any in the county?
I personally don't, but I would bet somebody here does. I'm not from the town, whereas almost everybody else here is. So I think if you were to put that question out to the public, I think you could get some answers. I'm probably, unfortunately, the worst person to answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
James, is what you meant that these businesses are, and maybe these businesses are independent businesses, not residing within a contractor bay. So that's not the same business model that you have.
No,
They're similar in the sense that they're services. That's how you're.
Exactly. It's my understanding that these have all been recently approved as services.
Okay.
And that's what we're talking about, is whether or not, because that's the issue at hand here, whether the service is being carried out on site or off site. It's not necessarily that this is, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't have characterized it that way. Not that it's a contractor bay, but rather that these businesses are considered services. You don't necessarily come to those sites to get your service, but they are still service businesses, and they were allowed without any additional relief from this board for, if it wasn't services, it would have required some sort of additional relief. So yeah, I'm sorry, and thank you for helping with that clarification.
Just trying to see how similar they really are. And yeah, there's multiple things on this site versus something there, and that the other sites are more set up perhaps to have customers come to the site than this site is, because there's not a whole bunch of parking here other than what the employees are using.
Yeah, and it's not intended to have people coming, but I think with these businesses, and I don't think the question really becomes how many are on any particular site. That wasn't really the question raised. The question raised is, whether or not service means it's happening on site or off site. And I don't think any of those examples would suggest that it's an on-site service. I mean, take landscaping, for example. If you need landscaping services at your house, it's not at the landscaper's location.
Could you expand a little bit on light fabrication? What does that mean?
Yeah, I don't know that light fabrication is a great way to characterize. I wouldn't say it as such, but one of the examples I gave was, so frequently with HVAC, I just happen to know this from having a boiler replaced recently. So this whole boiler mechanism comes in several pieces, and there's some assembly required before it is actually installed in a customer's home. And that's the type of thing. So it's really assembly. It may be, and also similar to what Attorney Hoppick had mentioned. So if a plumber has, say, a certain job that requires a certain type of pipe fitting and several connections that have to be put together, it would frequently be easier to make those connections on a bench, on a tool bench, rather than under somebody's countertop or in a wall or in a crawl space. So that pre-work is done, or preparatory work is done before the service is done on site at a customer's home.
So in order to do that, you're talking about having welding?
I don't.
Welding, soldering. So where I'm going with this.
Soldering is very rare these days, but
Talking about Oxygen tanks, acetylene tanks.
none of the above. But if those,
Be stored on the premises?
so if those are regulated, then those would have to be regulated by the fire department. None of the examples that I've contemplated use those types of things.
The HVAC guys who weld?
No. Soldering is actually very different than welding. That's just propane or MAP gas. These are things you buy at Home Depot or Lowe's. However, that's not really used all that often. And again, those are the type of things that it's not a bulk storage situation. Those people are using the bottle that's this big that you buy for your own home use as well. And again, these are the types of things, if a particular use was proposing something like that, a particular tenant that fell under some other regulations and needed some additional relief, then yeah, they would need that additional relief. But we don't have those exact uses yet because we don't have the tenant list yet. I mean, what our proposal is for these contractor service space.
Thank you.
In your written documents that you sent to us, you characterize some of those uses, the light fabrication and the storage of materials as the kind of accessory uses which are permitted in our ordinance. Do you want to speak to that a little bit, since we haven't given you a chance to do that yet?
Yeah, I don't think it's appropriate or accurate to characterize the storage of your business supplies as warehousing. I think just about every business has some sort of supplies. I think the example used, I work at a law firm. We have lots of paper, stacked up reams of paper. We're not a paper warehouse, we're a law firm. Same thing, if you're a plumber, you may have some fittings that you generally use, and you're going to keep a supply of those on hand. That's accessory to your primary use of providing a plumbing service. You're not a warehouse at that point. And I don't think that's a rational conclusion at all. I think that's a warehouse. Virtually every business has some sort of storage requirement. I'm sure there are things stored here in this building to keep the operation of this building going. That's ancillary stuff, and that's what we're talking about, is the storage ancillary to the businesses and the service uses that will be in these units.
I'm a little problem with the comparison, this building having what it needs to have to be able to run, as opposed to a carpenter who needs a plethora of things to be able to build a house. So I don't, there's the potential to having a varied amount of materials on that site is pretty high. I would imagine if the contractor base is wide open, if you said we're going to focus on electricians, it would be a little easier to define. But I don't think that comparison of this building having what it needs to run is comparison to what's going to be happening here. Because you're going to try to be, a plumber is going to try to have everything there they need to be able to respond to a customer, as opposed to we need toilet paper and some light bulbs here. So
Right. But the reason I make the comparison is because it's accessory to whatever the use is. So the things you have in this building are for the use of this building. And the things a plumber may have are for the use of his business, because he's running his business or her business out of that particular unit. When you say warehousing usually will mean that you are stockpiling inventory that you are distributing or selling out to other people who are then going to sell it again. And that resale is sort of the big difference between warehousing and accessory storage of your own inventory for your service business.
Okay. Any other questions to the board at this point? Not that we're shutting down the board, but we're gonna open it up to the public. Everybody okay at this point? Okay, we'll have more time. So, this is a public hearing. We'll ask members of the public if you choose to speak. Come to the mic, identify yourself for Barbara here, so she can know who you are, and let us know if there's anyone here that is looking to speak. Please.
I'm Deborah Sprague at 42 Base Hill. I've been there almost 50 years. The road is dangerous, as is right now. The bridge that they're gonna have to constantly go over is not well. And we cannot find out when it was last checked, but people in the neighborhood know that the understructure of that is getting dangerous. Just Arlington paving vehicles going up and down are a concern. When they were talking earlier, they said they would probably have to have a box truck. And they did not indicate 5 employees. They did indicate 2 dug wells. They indicated 2 septic systems. It's going to have heat and lights and bathrooms and all kinds of stuff, which is going to be very tempting to a guy or a woman that's working there that doesn't have a place to live. 30 by 60 is a big piece, and you want 40 of them? I don't see it happening and not interrupting with the wetland that's there. I mean, if people have been in town, Bardwell's cows used to be down there, but other than that, there hasn't been anything on that property since I lived there. So the road is so narrow, even if you come in from the Keene side, it's very narrow. And again, the first time we heard about all of this, he was talking about tractor trailers coming in and unloading supplies. So that sounds like a whole lot more than some plumbing supplies. I don't get it. We have an industrial park area. This is not industrial park business. I mean, it is. It's just, we've already got the storage units, and they're going to be using the same driveway that this company is going to use. It's within feet of neighborhood backyards. It's just not a place for this. It really isn't. And I hope you'll take that into consideration. I was hoping that the man that went and did the conservation was here, because we were told that the wetlands may very well be involved. And we have all kinds of wild animals there. And I'm just glad I'm not one of the 3 neighbors that it's going to be in my backyard, but you still you gotta hear us. You know, the road is just not capable of this kind. When the marketplace opened, all the Massachusetts people come over to go to the marketplace. And now you've got all the Vermont people coming over to go to Market Basket. It's a narrow road. And it's just not for this. I'm sorry. It's just not.
Thank you very much. Adam?
I just wanted to make ma'am, I appreciate what you said, I appreciate what you said, I understand you know, the words and so forth, but from a board's perspective, we have a very, very narrow focus of what we're able to determine what would influence a decision one way or the other.
Several years
And it
ago, I had to
just-
come to the zoning board to be able to put a porch on the back of my house.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
Our scope is just this big. That's, I just want to make sure that that's understood as we go through this, you know, it's really what it comes down to is the definition of services. And that's the role of what our board is here to determine. We're all Swanzey residents. We all live here. We have to deal with the same rules that everybody else has to deal with. If I want to put a porch on that was not in compliance with the particular, I would have to be in the same seat. And so, but our focus, you know, fortunately and unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, is very, very narrow. So really, it's just a definition at this point of services.
well,
So,
it used to be a really nice neighborhood and it's not a neighborhood anymore because they keep bringing in more stuff. So, thank you.
I just
I'm
wanted
just
to make
adding
sure.
to that, we want to make sure that you believe that you have been heard by the board. It's way out of our jurisdiction,
Fine.
but the town administrator is there, he heard what you said.
Thank
And you'll have to go through the motions, but as a resident of Swansea,
Well, I was concerned when you
It's a
said
back
you
row.
were going to be meeting based on the planning board. So are we supposed to assume that the planning board has already approved this and they're just
They have
waiting
not.
for your final word?
no, they have not, so let me just give them a little explanation there, Mr. Chairman. Yeah. So I learned this tonight, I didn't know it as well, but apparently with the planning board, it's a two-step process. The first step is to meet with them and discuss about everything that you have to submit to make a complete application. That's all that's been done so far. It has not been met to be voted yes or no. Or anything. They're only put a package together. Yes, they have a package. And then it was appealed to come to us for the definition of services because our zoning ordinance and the language in the application don't match. Okay, but as far as everything else, it has to go back to the planning board regardless. The water table, that's state, that's not the zoning board. Planning board, I have to cross that bridge, literally.
Well,
The
this
road use is
gentleman's
done by the
backyard
state.
is
They own
Gonna
it.
be from here to that wall. That's how close they're gonna have to come in to avoid the wetland. But he said very clearly that there would be tractor trailers coming in on both sides of these buildings.
Ma'am, I just want to add, I've been to the site twice, 2 site visits, and I am very sympathetic to what you have to say. But that's not the issue that we have to decide tonight. I mean, I
Thank you
feel
for
for you
listening.
in a lot of ways.
And to be clear, what we're deciding tonight still has to go back to the planning.
Right.
There is no planning board permits issued here. There's no zoning issue, permits issued here. It has to go back to the planning.
Good afternoon, Eric Tarrant, 131 Base Hill Road. So Tarrant, Tarrant. The impact is gonna be like within 30 to 20 yards of my back door. And I understand what you were just saying, her. My biggest thing is listening to this fellow here, where he says it's going to be a service. And that's what they're saying, which is fine, but he doesn't know who's gonna be in there. So he talks about, you know, being a warehouse. Well, when does it, is it a service? And when does it not become a warehouse? Well, we don't know. That's the unknown, right? I just want you to hear exactly what he was saying. He doesn't know if it's gonna be a warehouse. He's saying it's a service, but it could potentially come back to you or the planning board to maybe somebody wants to have a warehouse there. But that's all I think we're really concerned about. So that's not what we want. That's really all I have to say. But thank you for listening.
Someone else?
Would you like to have a retort?
Someone was raising their hand. Hello, my name's Nancy Sporborg and I actually live in Keene. I drive on Base Hill Road every single day, just about. And I just want to make one point. I understand, can I not speak?
We'll need her name.
Can you just say your name again?
Nancy Sporborg. Sporborg.
Nancy
Got it.
Scoreboard?
Yes.
Okay, Nancy Scoreboard.
She's a keen resident.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Scoreboard. SPORBOR.
The point I want to make is that I understand that the businesses that will rent the bays are service businesses. However, the overall organization is renting space to 40 different service organizations is a commercial business. Just because the business service provides space for services doesn't mean it's a service organization. It's a commercial organization serving 40 different service businesses. Did you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
I thought they were what she said. So anyway, microphone, you like?
I believe what you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, ma'am, you said that this is really a commercial enterprise which is serving service businesses.
Correct. Just because the service businesses are renting the space doesn't mean that this overall business is service. It's not, it's commercial, renting to service businesses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here or on Zoom?
Attorney on.
Oh, go ahead.
I would yield to anybody else in the public before I rebut. So if there's anybody else, I can wait a second.
Yeah, just wait a second.
Unless there's anybody, I'll take the opportunity.
Please do.
So just briefly on these other businesses. Fieldstone LLC, Cheney Electric, Pappas, and maybe Tri-State. I think there are 3 or 4 businesses that I heard. Furloin, according to its website, is a power generation operation in Swanzey. Every one of these businesses has a significant retail component. Cheney Electric does, Pappas Construction does, Tri-State Restoration, which is, I guess, a glass repair business, that does the same thing. Now, we heard my colleague over here talk about, well, they don't really know if a customer will come in to these construction bays. Very unlikely, very unlikely. They're not going to be advertising for retail services or sales there. They're going to be supporting, as Ms. Sporborg mentioned, they're going to be supporting the business contracting tenants, business operations at other sites, job sites. That's what they're really going to be doing. And that's going to create activity. Now, I want to point out something that I respectfully disagree. Ms. Sprague mentioned about the tractor trailers. And you guys were telling her, we hear you, but I don't think you heard her. Tractor trailers would be indicative of a commercial use. That's what that information that you told you means. So I think that's a piece of information that you can use to show that it is relevant and that this proposed use is not a services use. Now, it's true. I'm on the Keene ZBA. In fact, I'm the chair of that board right now. And I'm in my last year, but neither here nor there. But when we evaluate a case, we look at what is proposed. We're not fortune tellers. We don't have a crystal ball in front of us. And I don't know, council here is right. They're estimating 5 employees per unit. Well, that you have to take that as their good faith representation and assume 5 people per unit will be employed at each of these 40 units. That's 200 people. Now, We don't know. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe it'll be 6, maybe it'll be 10, maybe it'll be 2. But right now, you have a proposed use that says 5 people there. What are those 5 people going to do? They're going to support the tenant's business. And they're going to do that by inventorying parts, shipping those parts to job sites, and supporting that business activity. All these businesses that the applicant relies on to say that administrative law applies are different. They don't have construction bays. They are mostly retail and commercial operations. And I might add, they're all located close to a major highway, like Route 10. Penny Electric is on South Winchester Street. Pappas is on Route 32. Tri-State is on Route 10. And I really couldn't find where Flow One was located, but my client tells me they're located near one of the major roadways through town. This particular application is on Base Hill Road, which is largely, although zone business, is largely a residential neighborhood, as you heard from some of the people who live there. Now, and you can't see it from Route 10 going south or north, as you can with these other businesses. So there's a significant distinction between what the applicant's trying to say supports their application under the law, under the heading of administrative gloss. We just don't agree with that. They're not similar comparisons. What we think you should do, this is a commercial use, as Ms. Floorboard mentioned, and as I mentioned earlier. What this applicant needs is a variance for that kind of use at this property based on the information in the application, which is what you have to go on. Because that's all you have. It's a proposed use. It's not a defined use yet. It's a proposed one. So you take what's proposed and you plug in the rules in the ordinance and you make a decision. Is this use permitted in this zone? The answer is no. And that's all I have. I thank you very much for your consideration.
Sure. So there was some talk about tractor trailers and things like that. What's permitted in this zone? Quote from the ordinance: retail sales, service. Is retail sales not commercial? Does that not involve tractor trailers? I mean, this is a business zone. So we have people saying that these are services, but it's a commercial business because it's renting to those services, and that makes it not okay. That's just fine. I mean, this is a business zone. What we're proposing is a building that will be rented out to service providers. So I'm not really understanding how these arguments make this use impermissible under the ordinance. They do not. That is the use that is permitted under your ordinance. You know, saying that it's commercial doesn't make it impermissible. This is a business district. Retail sales and service are commercial uses. So that's an important distinction to make, because I think everyone getting hung up on the fact that since this is commercial, it's a problem. It's not. This is a business district. This is a commercial district. So I did want that clarification to be on the record. There was a gentleman who pointed out that we don't know exactly who the tenants are. And yes, that's true. And like I said, there could be a proposed use that requires further relief. As I said before, that is entirely possible. I mean, we're proposing a building with an intended use. And this happens frequently. Buildings are built for one thing, and then someone might say, I want to use this building for something else. And that something else may require some sort of relief from the ZBA, or possibly some sort of other relief even from the planning board. We don't have a crystal ball. Sometimes there are proposals that come before the planning board and the ZBA that say, yes, we want to build this building and it's for Starbucks or it's for this gas station. And they know. Frequently, that's not the case. You don't know who the tenants are going to be. Frequently, you may have a proposal that says we're going to develop this retail building, but you don't know who the retailers are. And there may be some retailers that require additional permission. That is entirely possible. And so we're not saying that by upholding the planning board and the town's decision that you're green lighting this all the way for whoever may come in as a tenant in the future. That's not what happens here. This is simply an affirmation or really a rejection of an appeal of the way the town and the planning board has proceeded. And it is in fact proceeding consistently with the way it has in the past. You know, as further evidence of that, you have a staff memo from your planner, Mr. Peel, October 10th, that is saying this is how we've always interpreted these uses. And he references the definitions from the planning dictionary. So we have all the elements of an administrative gloss case here. That's what this is. It's textbook. You have it from your own planner. So I want to make sure these things are clear in the record, because I think what we're hearing is not exactly what the actual record reflects. However, a lot of paperwork here. Not everybody remembers everything that you have here. So on that particular issue, you may want to refer back to the staff memo of October 10th, where Mr. Peel did say, this is how we typically interpret these uses. That's all I have to clarify the record. Thank you.
Just a question for you. The edges of who could use this, to me, when I say the edges, the potential users is fuzzy. And who wouldn't you have in here? What is the kind, I mean, you have a sense of who might be coming in. Where might you as an, not you, but the owner, you would think draw a line, saying that probably, it's not, you know, this wouldn't be anything we would consider here. You have that sense of the type of, you know,
well,
you mean?
That's difficult to answer.
I know.
However, what I can tell you, since someone suggested potentially residential, no way. We're not going to allow us in illegal use. In the end, we own and operate this property, so we're not going to allow illegal uses there, uses that require additional permits. You know, if someone came to us as a tenant, and every one of the leases, there's a permitted use, and no one is allowed any use contractually under the lease that violates law. If there's a use that perhaps we thought was okay, and the town came and said, nope, this is not okay, you need a special exception or a variance, we're going to agree with the town, and we're going to have the tenant go forward and seek that relief. We're not going to stick out our neck out, or the property's neck out, for the benefit of a debate of whether any particular tenant may be allowed or not. But to answer your question, I mean, what wouldn't we allow? You understand, by the nature of it, it's very hard. We wouldn't allow a baseball team. You know, I don't know. Like, there's a million things we wouldn't allow. What we envision are these, again, typical contractor bays. I don't know what else I could give you for examples of what wouldn't allow, other than, again, to respond to some of the maybe conjecture or suspicion that people would be living there. That won't be allowed for sure.
It does happen. In these businesses, it does happen.
I understand. You know, I actually have clients who do portable self-storage with the boxes, and people have been found living in those too. People are crazy and they do crazy things. And we're not going to support that, and we're not going to allow it. If it happened and we found out about it, it would be a problem. And if the town were enforcing again, you know, if someone breaks the law, someone breaks the law. We're not going to tell people they can do that. Obviously.
Do you contemplate on-site management, someone there during normal business hours?
I don't believe these facilities have any on-site management now.
Other questions?
Yes, just clarification.
Just give us your name, just your name for the.
Victoria Ames, planning board, what is administrative gloss? I've never heard that.
Sure. So it's a legal maxim, and most basically, administrative gloss means if that an ordinance is subject to one or more interpretations, if it has an ambiguity, and the town has consistently chosen one interpretation, that then becomes the law. Unless the town makes a zoning amendment. And if you think about it, it's kind of fair because people come to depend on how the town has consistently treated something. That is what happened in this case. I know that Mr. Brandon, the engineer, has been here before, and that is the interpretation that he understood, but that is what.
It means administrative gloss means the historical interpretation of the ordinance.
Yes, when the ordinance is subject to some ambiguity or different interpretation, yes.
Yes, your name?
Jan Govich. I don't know who this question's for. If he.
Just so we get your, we didn't quite get your name.
Jan Govich.
Jan Gopi.
Thank you.
If you rent something, one of these storage units to someone, how does the town find out who's renting and what kind of stuff they have?
Yeah.
Not actually.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, Mike, planning board. What happens, this is a multi-tenant building, what they're doing. They have, when they sign up, say they sign up pennies to come in there, they have to take, that tenant has to come down and have an application before the planning board, and we look at it. And then we make a decision on whether that tenant can go in there or not, based on zoning and site regulations.
Thank you.
I have a question. I'm on Zoom. This is Kathy Lanfear. I live over on Base Hill Road in Farmstead Commons. And a couple things. I'd like to know who we would go to with our complaint about the traffic on Base Hill Road, the safety of that traffic on Base Hill Road, and who's going to keep up that road if in fact this is completely approved.
So this is Brian. So Base Hill Road, unless I'm incorrect, and I'll look to my town administrator to correct me, but that's a state-owned highway. The town's stuff. Oh, so then that would be the town public works department. Oh, then that would be for the Swanzey side, be the town public works department.
What about the Keene side?
No, same, Keene Public Works.
That would be Keene Public Works. So, and they don't, obviously Keene wouldn't have any say in what's going on here. Am I correct?
No.
No, the Keene was allowed to come to the planning board to talk, but because this was deemed to be of regional impact. So Keene did have a chance to speak to the planning board and probably could in the future speak to the planning board about the site plan.
Who from Keene?
I don't remember who it was who came. I was at the meeting, but I don't remember who came.
You know what department it was?
Community resources.
What's that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Jesse Brown, that's what it was, Jesse Brown from Community Resources. Did you hear that?
Yes, I did. Thank you very much.
City of Keene.
There's one home that's Keene and two that are Swanzey, but they're neighbors.
Mhm.
They're all about it.
And my second question is, I'm assuming that this development of that property is not infringing on residential area or the wetlands. Is that correct?
This is in the business district. And when it comes down to wetland impact, again, that's not for the zoning board, that's for the planning board. When it goes back there, the applicant will still have to submit his full application. You'll still have to go through planning board review, which will include water impact.
Okay, so then any of us that have a problem with this should go to that meeting that's next week. I think it's next week, isn't it? Next Monday?
It's this Thursday.
Oh, it's this Thursday?
Oh, it's not on
6 o'clock
next week.
this week.
No, it's this week.
The 11th.
But they're not on the docket.
They're not on the agenda right now.
Okay,
So it'd be planning board next
Well,
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks planning, but okay. And is it the same login as we have now? Or is it different?
Thanks.
Login information,
So I have no idea.
it would,
Yes.
it would be the same.
Login, it's gonna be a different login.
Verify her last name, please.
Ma'am,
Yes,
could you spell your last name?
sure. It's LAN as in Nancy, P as in Peter, HEAR.
Thank
Thank you, and it would be the same login.
It would. Okay, great. Thank you very much, everybody.
We'll say for one order.
Yes.
Are these Swanzey residents speaking?
No, no,
They're not Swanzey residents speaking?
I have no idea.
I believe one was.
But they're buyers. They are buyers.
They are about, okay. Anybody can speak if they own property in the town, whether they live here. Okay. Just kind of.
All right, we are still in public hearing. Any other questions from the board? Any other comments from folks that are gathered here? Or anyone on Zoom who's listening?
Speak, and I'm on Zoom, and my name is Don, D-O-N, Sporborg, as Nancy, S-P-O-R-B-O-R-G.
Thank you.
I think we can assume that there will be a number of tractor trailers, a number of vans, and cars, of course, for the employees. But the vans, the tractor trailers, that feels commercial to me. And just as an example, in one of the bays, if that organization is to deliver a boiler and they need to do pre-assembly in the bay, that feels commercial. Once the van is loaded and they deliver that boiler to a resident, that feels like a service. So the operation within the building and within the bay, to me, is commercial. They're not providing a service directly to a resident. Only when it's loaded onto the van and delivered to the resident does it become a service. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Members? Anything else from anyone here? Please.
I'm not sure I'll have the last word, but Administrator Ross, the businesses cited by the applicant were distinguishable from the application before you, in that they don't have construction days there. They're retail operations, as well as commercial operations. They're all near highways. So I don't think, I agree with council's definition of what it would administrative clause means. I don't think it applies in this case. It's certainly not a textbook situation for application of that. So I'll just end with that. But I think you've heard all the information, and I agree with the folks that say this is a commercial use. The intensity of the use on the site is what we have to worry about, based on what's proposed.
Yes, your name?
Linda Goslin, and
Can you come up?
sure.
Please, thank you.
I just wanted to say that one of the things that Linda Goslin, Gousslin, Linda. One of the other facilities or whatever you want to call these things that Chad was talking about. He was talking about one of them, they were building frames in the facility. So I would say that is pretty commercial. If they're actually building frames in a building, in one of those bays or whatever you want to call them. But that to me would be commercial. That would not be a service if you're actually building things. So that was all. And the other thing I did want to say, I know this tractor trailer thing is really getting a little run out, but when we talked about it with Chad before, he said they were all gonna come in Route 10. Well, let me tell you something. If you're a tractor trailer driver coming down Route 9 and you get to the roundabout and your GPS says take a right, you're not gonna go looking for Route 10 to come in the other end. So all the signs that are on the Keene end of the road that say no through trucks might as well not be there.
Swanzey was saying.
So, yes, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on the board?
I would have one final summary.
Please.
I'll be very, very quick. I'm not going to say anything new. But just again, the tractor trailer and traffic things, as I'm sure you know, those are site plan review, planning board issues, not really what we're here for tonight. And everyone keeps raising commercial, again, it's the business district. So I don't see commercial as the tipping point there. And then finally, as the chairman of the planning board said, and I wasn't aware exactly that this is how Swansea does it, but many other towns do, that some sort of minor site plan or use approval is required for each tenant. So that's where that sort of check and balance comes into play. So I think those three things are pretty important as an overall summary. None of them are new, but I think they're important to remember. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question, and it might as well be, I guess, to the board. When we, let's say there were a review and a variance or an exception was required. Does that stay with the renter, or does it stay with the property? Because in the past, we have worked with, some facilities like the music people at the fairgrounds, and that was going to stay for 10 years. It was gonna, the exception to allow them to play music on the weekends really loud was gonna be like a 10-year thing. So how does that work? If each, in a multi-tenant environment where a tenant is granted an exception and they move, let's say they're there 18 months and they're gone, does that exception stay with that building? Or does it go with them when they leave?
If I may, Mr. Chair, normally the general rule is that the variance runs with the land. So your permission to use a use not permitted, which is what a variance is, would stay with the land or the unit, which is odd because it's not the whole piece of property, it's something to track. I find the question is a fascinating one and a difficult one. If you try to apply it to the individual 40 units, I think you'd have a hard time doing that. You'd have to make it maybe terminable, I imagine.
Right.
The duration of the
The
lease,
duration of the lease.
because then you don't know who's gonna come in again.
Right.
So, but normally the rule is to run with the land.
Mike?
Mike Jasmine, code enforcement. You're talking specifically about multi-tenants.
Well,
Not variances, not special exceptions, the
Right.
multi-tenant process.
multi-tenants.
The multi-tenant process is the multi-tenant process. It's for that applicant.
Okay,
Okay, so if you do shoe repair,
yeah,
you move out, that doesn't mean the next person can automatically do shoe repair.
right. I'm just trying to
I hear you. I hear you. I
conceive,
just want to
I'm
make sure that.
trying to conceive how often it might occur that they can't find enough tenants that meets their regular requirements and they want to find some more. So that's,
Okay, each and every tenant's gonna have to come before the town and before the board and be viewed as to what
Vetted.
they're doing.
okay.
It's kind of a mini site plan review, if you will.
One last time?
One little thing.
Please, no, that's, they're not closing the public hearing. Don't want to do that. Anyone wants.
Victoria Ames, planning board. I get confused with these things, so maybe other people are too, but we have a commercial industrial district, right? But we don't have a specific, we don't have a permitted use that is the commercial use, okay? There's a bunch of different kinds of uses that are commercial uses, but we don't have something that falls under the umbrella of being a commercial use.
All right. Anyone else before we close the public hearing? No one on Zoom popping up, so we will close the public hearing. And we'll move into some deliberation to some discussion amongst the board. Anyone want to jump on? Thoughts, ideas?
I'll just address the elephant in the room. Everybody keeps talking about tractor trailers and the road not being a good road or safe road. Whether it's state owned or town owned, because it's town owned, we've already determined that. That's a whole separate issue, has absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about. However, I want to make sure that it's on the record that we acknowledge the conversation from several people about that same topic. The road certainly could be widened out and trees cut down, and the fallacy that, well, it's owned by Yale Forest and we can't touch it, it's just not accurate information. But it is what it is. So the road has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian.
I'll just add for you guys, looking at reviewing the some of the other proposed, well, it's not proposed uses that the board looked at for, you know, for services and these other companies, you know, knowing at least Pappas Construction, off 32, there's a lot of things going on over there. You know, construction, one of those aspects is a horse farm. You know, they're making oil, I guess.
Yeah.
It is. So there's a lot of, you know, both those things are occurring in those properties. But I think there's definitely a case to be made that landscaping and electrical services most likely going to be offsite. You know, you're not going to, you know, get your landscaping and have a landscaping service and as a customer and bring it back. Right. You know, so it's implied that at least those two things. I don't know enough about TC Legacy or Full in terms of their day-to-day, but glass restoration and so forth, that could happen anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it could happen on site, it could happen in your, you know, in your driveway. So in terms of how these uses are being looked at and the way we've interpreted both as a board, ZBA, planning and so forth, may not be 100% aligned with, you know, with what this particular use is.
Mm-hmm.
So just because these have happened doesn't necessarily mean that it's the way the town's always voted.
Right.
And knowing the zoning board, we've always looked at cases one by one. You know,
Right.
precedent has some level of, you know, at least influence on how a decision is made, but it's not as any year I've ever been on the board or any case we've been part of has been the rule of thumb.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's always been a case by case situation and we look at the relevant information and make a decision based upon that. So best of luck to your decision making, but I just want us to reference this from my perspective.
Other members of the board. Their thoughts.
I want us to discuss a little bit about what the actual use proposed is here. I mean, we've heard arguments that this is the use is to provide facilities for others to use the place. And it's my feeling that the use of this place is defined by the people who will actually be engaging in activity on this place, not all purpose storage. Their use of providing spaces is not the use that's being proposed. What's being proposed is the kinds of businesses that will be using the bays.
Okay.
And I don't know how everybody else feels about that.
Close.
Well, I'll jump in.
Please.
I feel that the proposed uses go beyond or exceed what I consider services. I think it's interfabricating and it's manufacturing and commercial. That's how it feels to me. It doesn't feel like services. Feels like you're building something, you're making things, you're producing things. You're welding, you've got gases, you've got, if you've got 3 or 4 people welding things and however many units, that's a lot happening. That's not a service. So in my opinion, I think maybe they might need a variance and or a special exception. But I think it definitely goes beyond services, what I would consider services.
And that really is, I believe, what we're here to determine.
Right. So that's my opinion.
So then I would ask you this question, and I don't have an opinion made yet. Agreeing with your statement, then testimony has been provided that, if I understand it correctly, which I may not, we're making a decision on the property and the bill, whether it's within the use as we defined it in the zoning. Individual users would then have to come in themselves to still get a variance or special exception if they intend to do something that's outside of whatever it is we provide as guidance, right? So Penny Plumbing, they're in a multi-use building. They do some retail, but they really don't do retail on it. We can say they do, but they don't. They don't. It's over phone, it's over site visits, it's over whatever. And that's a multi-use building. But if they were to leave there and open up Penny Electric there and put a retail, they'd have to get a zoning permit to do that. I'm assuming it's the same for this. If we're talking about granting or denying the application and their understanding of use and services, the individuals still have to come here if it's beyond the norm, right?
And the planning board too,
And the planning board too.
And yeah, and given that we don't know, and even the applicant had stated they don't know everyone that's going to be in there, but it could be a broad range of organizations, which, at least what I'm looking at would fall under services, where some of them might, what you're calling fabrication, and where, you're not really manufacturing anything from raw materials and turning ore into steel, into pipe. You're not doing that, but you might be taking a pipe and bending it with some tools that you have inside the facility. So I am seeing, and I see what you're saying, and I can see where, but to say the entirety of the proposal is, there's quite a lot of what I would think are services in here. So I couldn't, that's the way I'm looking at it. It's both retail to some extent, because they're gonna have office spaces, they're gonna be taking phone calls and inventory, that sort of thing. There are still services going on.
I also, go ahead.
I would just say, knowing what I know about some of the proposed uses here, both being electrician, HVAC, plumbing, these are all things that are occurring on site. There's
Yeah.
very, very little fabrication on any of those things. I don't care what kind of plumber you are, you're not sitting there making your bends
No.
at the facility and bringing them there. It's all site by site basis. It's all based upon what's going on there. Maybe you could see a potential for some of that occurring on site, but I would imagine very, very little, and I don't know what else you'd call some of these things. Electrician is not a service. What's the difference between, I guess you can make a differentiation between being an attorney or an accounting firm, where maybe some of the work is actually being done on site. And then some of that may live in a courtroom, and some of it may live in some other area, but these all seem like services to me. Every single one of them, whether they're.
When I'm looking at
That's
it,
just my opinion.
I'm leaning in, I'm leaning in that direction, because certainly there could be some businesses that come in there that aren't appropriate and may need additional, either need to be located somewhere else. But
Or a law firm.
all the examples we have are service related. I just think about the people who live in my community that where they're running their whole business out of their house,
Mhm.
out of the garages. When they've grown to the point where they're in the lawn and, they could fit in a location such as this. Maybe they've grown to that point. How big does a business need to get before it needs its own facility, owns its own property? But using a facility like this would be a stepping stone for many businesses, growing businesses.
I just want to point out what I consider a problem with the language of the zoning ordinance. And I don't want to be too nitpicky, and I certainly going to have people disagree with me here, but I read line F under uses permitted as retail sales, services to imply that retail applies to sales and retail applies to services. And I do so because the collection of permitted uses under each letter are listed, the things that are listed are related uses. And in other lines on that page, things like private club or lodge, private applies to club, private applies to lodge as well. Commercial greenhouse or nursery, commercial applies to greenhouse, commercial applies to nursery. I think the similar uses are separated by semicolons, not commas. And services is defined differently in our planner's dictionary, which is what I choose to use as the Bible or the dictionary here. And service and retail service are two different things. Retail service implies things that are like restaurants or real estate and insurance, things where people come to the site and use the services. Whereas services in general are any act that results of useful labor, which does not in itself produce a tangible commodity. So all the examples given by the developer are services and not retail services, according to that definition. So they aren't, in my mind, if you read the zoning ordinance carefully, the general services are not an approved use in the business district. It's retail services which are approved. Now, if somebody were to have a retail service that was there, it would not be one of the listed things that the applicant is listed in their application, but if this facility were approved and somebody with a retail service business were to come, it would be covered by the zoning regulations. Just as an aside, I hope the planning board looks at changing the language a little bit here to be sure they're getting what they want here. But if I strictly read the zoning ordinance, I don't see how the types of services applied for fit. However, I do see that the argument could be made that the usage is more properly professional and business offices, which is an approved use. I consider the fact that there's going to be an office on site to be part of what's going on here, and it's going to be used by a professional plumber with an office and storage and vehicle space. And I think that fits there, which is an approved use. But I'm more than willing to change my mind if people have counter arguments.
What you're saying is you believe our ordinance, when it comes down to that section where it says retail sales services, that those services were, the word services was intended to be associated with retail.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
That's the way I read it. Now, other people could read it differently. But looking at the construction of the other lines here.
Yeah.
I believe that Services is supposed to be attached to retail.
So James, are you saying that like the examples that were provided, plumbing, HVAC, landscaping, and electrical, you're saying that they don't have a retail component?
I'm saying that they don't meet the definition of retail services. So the retail services.
But they're professional
They're
services,
professional services. Right.
in your view.
The definition of retail service just that were provided by Julius from the Planner's Dictionary says establishments providing services or entertainment as opposed to products to the general public for personal or household use, including eating and drinking places, hotels and motels, finance, real estate and insurance, personal service, motion pictures, amusement and recreation services, health, education and social services, museums and galleries, all of which seem much different from the proposed uses that for this application. So I'm struggling because I do think that the town wants, I think the town wants services.
I think we want the availability of getting our plumbing taken care of.
But I don't think the way the zoning ordinance is written, there's any provision for that. Except as professional business offices, which is what some of those things like tenant and office, etc. have. It's just I'm stuck by being a nitpicker. So I want to be talked out of it, but that's where I am at this point.
Other folks? I did find it to be heartening or good news that that proposed users of this facility would have to go through the town. I think there's a lot to be said for sitting down with our mics and be able to just flesh out things of that sort and make sure that that's helpful to me to know that this is not just a blanket approval. Whatever the owner decides to move in there is going to be open, because it can get pretty broad. I think the potential here, I don't want to be ridiculous, but it's pretty broad what can go into this place and what's necessary for that, whatever that might be, to sustain itself there. The products do have to come in somehow, and they have to leave. Manpower is necessary to do some of this work, if it's luckily so just loading and offloading. So this is intended, it's going to be a active site. I think when a lot of us think about these facilities, they're pretty static. Because they're storage, right? There's oftentimes nobody touches that storage unit in months and months and months. So I don't think it's apples and apples to what's going on here, and what's being proposed is very different than what we had before. I can see the need from a contractor perspective of trying to move out of your basement and your garage to that next level, and that's a big step. If you
That's what this provides.
I can see that here, but then again, it's you could have someone making. I don't want to go to an extreme. Anything can be happening in these things, if potentially, if indeed. But that's where I'm heartened that we're going to have a chance to review
Well,
that.
and we've only got the 4 examples.
Yeah.
So.
It could be.
I mean, there could be
100 examples.
And there could be any number of uses that don't require permits.
Mm-hmm.
That fall in one of the other categories that's already permitted in the business.
I tend to agree with Jay that seems like that word services, when it appears in a way that supports, or at least is intended to describe and be a part of a retail establishments, retail sales, as he said, services. I don't think it doesn't appear to me either, my interpretation, that services doesn't stand alone. So that, because that's such a broad category. I mean, services it's everything.
Services is, yeah, indeed, it is everything.
Very, very
So
broad. So I do think that it's hard for us to figure that out. I know, but I think that's what we're doing here. We're interpreting. And I do agree with Jay's interpretation of of where that word services intends to be directed toward in its retail. Within the context of our ordinance. It appears that way to me. And this goes beyond just traditional retail, I think, the way I
Well,
think about it.
And I would
Commercial.
point out that, well, I mean, there could be some component, but some of the businesses that may make use of this space may not have any items at all that they need to be stored. There might be other materials that they, that they have there.
Mhm.
There
Well, I
there might
think
be,
these are those rabbit holes that we could be talking about.
we could talk about it all day, because they may,
This definition of commercial, well, that has no
they're,
bearing on this
and-
conversation.
yeah, and I'm not even saying
But
that word.
retail is commercial,
And
Walmart's commercial,
Walmart,
Amazon's commercial, Penny Plumbing's commercial, so the vernacular doesn't fit the crime here.
no, I'm just
But by the
saying,
same token, in the business world, when you're talking about building things and manufacturing, that's industrial manufacturing.
That's
different
industrial.
than commercial.
that's not what this is, though.
So if I'm talking business to government or business to business, I'm going to assume that that is a commercial operation in nature, not geared to a retail situation, because it's not, by pure definition, it's not. Business to business will be building something to sell to a distributor, who's then going to sell to a retail organization
Right.
or consumer.
Well, everyone.
But if I go into a mini storage and I'm fitting pipes and bending pipes and I am now servicing to a retail customer, which is somebody that's paying me money to apply that pipe, that's retail. That's retail. I mean, I'm not going to a storefront, but the trouble is that we have this picture that if I can't walk into a Walmart and give somebody my credit card, then it's not retail. Well, that's just not accurate.
No, because in any of these
The
described.
guy that fixes my electricity, he's providing me a professional service,
Right.
case point. And he's using inventory that he has on hand, or that he's buying from a wholesaler like an FW Web or whoever, CED. Right? But his service and product to me is a retail organization. That's a retail sale to the end user.
Right.
Which is the definition of it.
That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I think we're kind of agreeing that it's professional services that are being offered here. Are we?
I'm leaning towards, professional and retail, yeah, both.
And the question is, how do we interpret the zoning ordinance?
Well, but then it comes down to maybe somebody wants to rent them, then it's not gonna be a question.
And then they have to see,
They might have to get a variance.
they might have to get a variance. But all the concerns, the wetlands, the traffic, the impact on the community, all those things will have to be, that's a burden that the planning board would need to be looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with the taxpayers as we are those as well. We're just volunteers here. But that road's a mess. It's been a mess for decades and they don't have any designs and doing anything about it.
Well, yeah,
But that's above us and beyond us.
right.
And increased usage typically dictates action.
Supposedly, if we would have
Not
thought that
always.
with all the increased activity on that road when they built the commons.
Yeah, not always, not always.
So.
Right.
Ready?
You ready?
I'm not quite ready. I need a minute.
Sure.
You want to work?
Anything
on
to
it?
add, Lisa? You can quiet in the corner.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to.
Still feel the way I feel. I think it goes above and beyond services. I think it's light industrial.
Glad I asked.
And I respect your opinion.
Well, thank you.
It usually means she disagrees. Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? All right. Well. Showtime.
So we really have three choices here, right?
What do you think?
I think we have the choice of granting the appeal, which would deny the package that has been submitted with the word services in it to the planning. We can grant the appeal with a modifier. Professional services as opposed to services or Mickey Mouse Club, whatever we decide. Or we deny the appeal and we let it stand as the zoning board, planning board has put forth with the word services as they intended. That's how I see it, the three, and I'm actually going off the keys.
Okay. Any other comments or? From the board? Questions within the board? Okay. Anyone comfortable with a motion of some sort?
I'll make one.
Okay.
I'm gonna put forth, I'll give you the language later, but I'll put forth that we use modified language in place of services,
Say it again.
that we use a modifier.
Would
Have
you,
the zoning board go, a planning board go from letter F to letter E.
Wait, hold on.
yeah, from retail services, sales services to professional and business offices.
Oh, so you're saying, okay,
Okay.
Well, we're only here to decide whether the planning board used their appropriately the word services, letter F in our zoning, right? And I think what Jay put forth is a solid argument that instead of services, he's providing the argument that E, the letter E would be more appropriate, which would be professional and offices.
Professional and business offices.
Professional and business offices.
So that would, if this is a question, so that would mean that that services is not the right.
That's,
no, well,
that's correct.
The retail services.
retail services, but services,
The planning board is what I was getting at. Planning board is
okay,
determination of this being services.
Or if we agree that the services is, then services is. I mean, that's really what we gotta decide, is services or not.
Is this, was their interpretation correct?
And what Brian is saying is we could decide that services is not correct as an interpretation of what this use is. But we could say the use is instead professional and business offices. We could say that. So in other words, there's a middle ground where we,
and are we saying then that in
Support the appeal, but deny the, or not deny, I'm sorry, you support the appeal, but interpret the language, the decision differently.
are we saying that in conducting their professional services, that people who do HVAC and landscaping, et cetera, could use those facilities to conduct their professional services,
that's. what
professional
we're saying.
businesses? Okay.
Point of order, Mr.
Go ahead, yes.
In order to properly record the motion, is this?
Oh, you haven't done the motion.
We haven't done the motion.
I thought you started.
No.
It's answered.
No. What I gave was the three options as I see it.
Yes,
And now we have to decide whether to leave the word services or remove the word services, or to grant the appeal and say it's just the board overstep.
Or misunderstood.
So, I mean, maybe doing a mock vote of who thinks deny, who thinks, because we have three choices, we have to come up with one, right? I don't know how people are leaning.
I think I don't know if we have many choices. The way I understand it is that we have to, it's been, the appeal is on the planning board's use of the,
correct,
of the word services.
of VBF, correct.
Mhm.
So we either have to grant, deny,
right,
or grant and modify.
that's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah, so those are the three categories.
Okay.
I would just say, point of order, I would just say, I think a proposal, I'm sorry, a motion should be made And without,
before we,
Without a mock.
yeah.
Yeah,
and then either, be that motion either be supported or not. And another motion could be
Yeah.
put forth if necessary.
Yeah, hard to do mock stuff. At the ZBA level.
Mr. Chair, I know this is inappropriate.
Yeah, we can't. We're closed.
Yeah, sorry.
I was gonna point you to something in the ordinance.
I don't think we can take any testimony in a closed hearing. Can't do
Yeah, I
it.
think it's slippery. Thank you, though.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Okay, well, I'll pick one and then we'll either approve it, deny it,
All right.
move forward to the second one. So denying the appeal, I make the motion to deny the appeal of Sherry Howard, challenging the planning board's September 14, 2023 decision. And find that the planning board properly classified the proposed use as retail services or services because of the following facts. It's important to note the CBA will have the issue, notice of decision and written findings.
So your motion is to concur with the
Fine.
with the planning boards.
That's what you said.
Is there a second on that motion? For discussion purposes.
Do I withdraw and go to the next one?
Well, if you don't get a second, you're gonna have to.
well, I don't understand. Wasn't following.
Basically, this is saying that the planning board did not overstep and they used the appropriate V,
Yeah,
Bravo, Foxtrot.
okay.
Is there a second to the?
I'll second that.
You'll second that. Okay,
Well, it's been moved and seconded. Help me here, feel free to pop in here, that the planning would correctly.
You want to read it again, Brian?
I make a motion to deny the appeal of Sherry Howard challenging the planning board September 14, 2023 decision to find that the planning board properly classified the proposed use as retail services, and quote, because of the following facts.
So we need to hear the facts.
Well, I think that's for us to decide. We're gonna have to issue a notice about findings and facts.
So we have a motion and a second on the floor. That the planning board correctly identified services. That this is what's been proposed is considered a service. Okay. I think let's, as a
Well,
public,
I'm not sure that's exactly what it is. We're denying the appeal, but we're not saying the planning board was correct. We're just denying.
Well, the appeal was the planning board overstepped and used the wrong terminology and the wrong wording.
Right.
So we're sustaining this motion of the three. This one sustains the plan.
okay. You understand the motions? Okay. So. In favor of that motion, I'm just gonna go down one on one. I'll start with Brian. You made the motion, you
Made the motion, so I have to accept.
yeah,
it, I guess.
okay, so you're yes, and
I'm yes.
okay. Lisa,
No.
Jay?
No.
And I'm going to vote no.
Okay.
So that motion,
I'm sorry.
no,
Thank you.
motion fails.
So we'll move on to the second, as that motion was denied.
Okay,
I think this is going to be a better approach. Let me just get my bearings here. okay?
sure, absolutely. Take your time.
Okay, so here we go, you ready?
Okay.
We'll take a second swing at this.
All right.
I make a motion to grant the appeal of Sherry Howard, challenging the planning board September 14, 2023 decision, and find that the planning board erred by classifying the proposed use as retail sales, comma, services. Instead, the use should be classified as Roman numeral V, letter Bravo, letter Echo. So V, B, E.
We have a second?
Brian,
Yes.
just E or? Are you looking at the same thing I'm looking at?
Well, we can only pick one of them.
Okay, can you read it again
So, okay. I will read it again, yes.
without the echo?
Yep. Keeping in mind that we already did letter F Foxtrot and was denied.
Point of order, the council chair.
Yes.
I think someone else should make.
What?
I'm not going to share it, but for continuity,
Oh.
I'm not. Huh?
Because is it, I'm thinking it's because you're like going from going from yes to no. You're making the motion, you made the motion that
Okay,
that the services is okay.
where the line is.
Down there.
Oh, you're not seated.
Here
Here you go, Jay. The second one.
Use this language.
Okay,
I make a motion to grant the appeal of Sherry Howard, challenging the planning board September 14, 2023 decision. And find the planning board erred by classifying the proposal use as retail sales, comma, services. Instead, the use should be classified as section 5 B and E, which is professional and business services. Because that the evidence we have in front of us indicates that there'll be professionals using these offices and spaces to provide services.
we have a second to that?
I'll second that.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded that the planning board did err in determining the proposed use to be services, in a nutshell. Let's see, who's the same order? Brian? No? Ann?
Yes.
Planning board erred. Lisa?
No.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
No.
No.
Jay?
Yes.
I will vote that the planning board did err in determining that the potential use for services. So it is a yes.
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 Three yeses
Because-
and 2 noes.
Right.
I think it's.
I'm sorry, what? Can we do a recess?
Yes. Quick recess with council, yeah.
Okay, do we need to take a vote on that? No,
I think you
okay,
can move it.
all right, we'll take a short recess. And pick this back up. Is that what's being asked?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Goodbye. We can either go downstairs, we can stay here.
We'll go downstairs as well.
Yeah.
Okay with council? Council? Sorry, if we take 5 minutes, okay with you?
Oh, yeah. Let's see that. It's
That's Okay, thanks.
That's the one on the. Yeah, but that is not what they're. Yeah, but they're not, yeah, but that's done by. Experience when the eventually goes out. There are some degrees unless they have some kind of genetic sale, those are the noise. And then you mean you have Windows. Yes. I had my back up full of water. I'm not there, but I watched the thing until 11:30. My mother was touchy. I'm just running. I'm like, I don't watch anything. I don't know what's the last time. What the chain and I'm like, I could go on, so I should take them out once a man. Every day. Yeah. That building is closest to us, you know, the way the county was. Yeah. And we can. I think something has something. Well, I can see. I mean, yeah, you can see that.
And it's got the screen and it's not good to do that. Check it out. Right. I'm gonna tell you this. Yeah, I'll be at home. I'll tell you this. Yeah, it's the. Yeah. Yeah. But still, I mean, that's what I grew up to. Serious. Yeah, it actually, this that I can see many.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, why would you believe that? So I went to the doctor and I went to the gravity in our lives. The sign got put back up. But this bar comes, yeah, here's one. The only time she's gonna go is when they have one right.
You know, I think it's. He's talking about money.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay. I would. It's right, because what you do, you don't have to pay for all those. Because you can't make a decision on it. You know how to get these side right, railway covers open. I disagree on one or two things, but you're not gonna get anybody to figure out the time. Any idea how to get those out? You started, I suppose. Well, she is. Yeah, I like. I can see because I'm the same. No, he's. Yeah.
Thank you, Josh. He's got the right fitness. That's what happens. A technical person, they always need that.
Yeah.
Put the chain up. Oh, so he puts on a chair, one of those things to be covered. I can't feel the primary. But she is. I understand it's well. He has. Well, yeah. You can get.
Yay.
You can get clear, reading it all. Yeah, she had none on Fox. Iowa.
No.
Yeah. She was doing good. She was good.
Well, she's busy, so.
Come to my house, I'll show you a nice picture of me. Yeah.
She's a busy lady.
Well, I've met her and talked to her several times.
Yeah.
I got never seen her, I'm not gonna get on the chair.
I like him. I like him because
Well, I like most of it, because when you want to she's on that.
Yes, you have that right.
Okay.
Sure.
All right, it was determined that our motion, our second motion, and we're clarifying this, is that the motion was that the planning board erred in determining this as services, and really it should be professional and business offices that is a more appropriate place, and that the vote that the planning board erred in determining this was a 3-2 vote. Voting in the affirmative was myself, Jay and Ann, and voting in the negative was Brian and Lisa. But it passed 3-2 that the planning board did err in determining this as being a service business. And anyone here who wants to help make sure that I'm stating things correctly, I would appreciate it. Okay, so the vote has been taken. Motion number 2 is that the vote is 3-2 that the planning board did err in determining this as being services. This business is being a service business, a service business. Services use. Services use of services. A service use. Thank you. So
The other part of that is the more appropriate one,
professional business offices, professional and business offices, which is within our ordinance. So the vote was taken that the planning board did err. We passed 3-2. And that's what we are in. Yes.
Perfect. So your appeals are done.
So not to use that.
Right.
Yeah, it's right there.
Yes,
That's it.
I think that is it.
This one here.
Any other business that may be required coming before this board? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you all.